So everything that we do and say here is going to be recorded just so you can go back and check on it a little bit later on so you can revisit the conversation. So Jeff can hear how he sounded on video.
But Jeff has to be careful here.
And all access members will receive a copy of the recording after we have it all finished up for you. So your audio is unmuted. I see that everybody, it looks like, has muted their own audio. Yay, thank you. Really appreciate that. And please remember, though, when you get ready to ask a question, to unmute so we can hear what you have to say. That would be a really terrific thing. And during the discussion, if you have a question, raise your hand. Jeff is going to have several opportunities throughout where he's going to specifically ask a question and really try to encourage your involvement. So raise a hand, or if someone's not noticing you, then just put a little note in the chat, and either Catherine or I will call on you and just say, hey, Jody, we see that you have a question. So we'll get it going for you there. All right. So there's a reason we have video too, guys, and we really appreciate everybody who is participating via video. I know a couple of you are having a little bit of technical difficulties, but if you're not and you're just being shy, please don't. Turn on your video. We really want to see your faces. It's a fact that 93% of communication is nonverbal. And one of the reasons we founded this as a video platform is so people really could engage and interact with each other, in a totally holistic way. So to the best of your ability, let us see your faces. Okay, so I want everyone to grab a beverage. Jeff is going to start us off with a toast, and the Bridge Club welcomes Dr. Jeff Thoren, who is going to talk with us a little bit today about mindfulness. Jeff, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Brenda. And so raise your glass or mug or whatever that might be, or plastic water bottle, I see. Welcome to Mindfulness Monday, the first of its kind here at the Bridge Club, and here's to maintaining a peaceful presence in a hectic world.
Cheers.
And who is interested in maintaining a peaceful presence in a hectic world? Anyone resonate with that? Yeah. Well, anyway, let me start with this. Let me start with a disclaimer. I'm a fellow learner. I don't want to position myself as an expert. I'm on a learning path, and I think one of the lessons with mindfulness is it is a lifelong practice. And I've been playing around with it for several years now. So I want to share a little bit of my story and share some things I've learned along the way, and hopefully create an opportunity for some of you who may be also practicing with various forms of mindfulness to pipe in with some of the things that you're learning, and we can all benefit from that. So I do want to start, though, with actually an exercise. And it involves, if you're willing, just kind of get comfortable in your chair. And if you're willing to either close your eyes or just softly maybe pick a point in front of you on your desk, or if you don't have anything right in front of you, a spot on the floor, but just kind of get comfortable in that spot. And I'm going to ask you to, for the next 30 to 40 seconds, just lean into your sense of hearing. So just really focus on your sense of hearing and see what comes up for you in the next 30 to 40 seconds. See what you notice. All right, so open your eyes and come on back. And if someone dialed in while that was going on, you probably thought, this is the weirdest thing I've ever... Anyway, let's hear from a couple of you. What did you notice? What did you pick up when you leaned into your sense of hearing during those 30 seconds or so?
I'll go. So I started listening, and then I heard my dog chewing on his foot. And I was thinking about how I really need to get that taken care of, when am I going to do that? And then next thing you will say, time is up, right?
Yeah. Very, yeah. Very interesting. Well, let's come back to that. Who else? And thanks for offering that up, Joy.
I'll jump in. I heard it's raining outside, and I heard the water coming down the gutters. And then because I am slightly having a fever right now, my brain is ringing. So it was the ringing sound plus
you heard that inside your head.
Yeah, fortunately.
So I'm guessing that others may have heard. I heard a clock ticking. I heard traffic outside. I heard the wind blowing outside, and probably all of you had things like that. And Joy alluded to something though. How many of you, like her, heard your own thoughts? Some variation of how long is this going to last? Why are we starting off with this? Did I change underwear this morning? Any variation of that is all possible and quite likely. Most of the time, 80% of a crowd will say, yes, I heard my own thoughts in there. And the interesting thing is then if you take nothing else away from this, you're getting it in the first couple minutes right here. It's research is showing that 50 to 70% of the time we are actually in our heads, either replaying the past or extrapolating into the future. And some of that can be useful. So if it's something around, where are my friggin' keys? Okay, let's think through this. When did I have them last? And then what did I do? That can be useful. If it's like, what's on my to-do list today that I absolutely have to get done? That can be useful when you're kind of in your head. But what's the downside of being in your head 50 to 70% of the time? It can end up leading to rumination. Okay, I'm worried about that. I'm worried about my dog's foot and what we're going to do about that, and how bad is it, and how much is it going to cost to get that fixed, and how long will this go on, and what's the prognosis. And so that can go on a long way, and it can just distract us from what's happening in the present. How many of you have been in a conversation where you're talking to someone and obviously their mind is somewhere other than in your conversation or with you? So all of us have experienced that, and we'll experience it again probably very soon. So it's there's a benefit for us if we can train ourselves and practice moving away from time travel, whether it be to the past or the present in our minds, and some of the downsides related to that, and becoming more present. So let me tell you a little bit. I'll just share a little bit of my story. Probably about 5 years ago, and I don't know why I started thinking about this, but I started to gravitate towards the idea of simplicity. Maybe it was, I was getting to a certain age where it's like, hey, I got to have some wisdom to show for all these chronological years or something. I don't know. But I started to think about, why do we as humans make things so darn complicated? What is it? And it's tax season, right? How many of you have been in the fetal position on the floor because you can't, you don't even know what the question is asking, let alone being able to answer it. So, our tax code is a great case in point of something that's so complicated, and we do it in a lot of other ways as well. There's, any examples of bureaucracy, government, or within, a corporate setting or even a regular business, bureaucracy can get in the way. And then just the constant noise. When do we not get away from something that's trying to grab our attention, is distracting us? What happened in the good old days when there were 3 TV networks, and at 12 o'clock they went to like a test pattern, and they didn't come on again until the next morning, and it was like quiet all night. You couldn't, you couldn't find noise. So as humans, we've made things complicated, and again, sometimes that works for us, and sometimes it works against us. But I started to wonder about, how could things be simpler? And there was also a parallel with my spiritual journey, because having gone to church forever and having all this head knowledge, I started to really have more of an interest in how can I experience the presence of God, and not just know about it, how can I experience it? And so that all kind of coalesced, and I was just ready for this idea of how to become more present and to experience presence. And so along about that time, and I'm going to share a few references, a colleague of mine, actually a coaching colleague, I was interested in learning and getting better as a coach. And I had run across an article that talked about using the principles of improvisational comedy in coaching. And I like improv, and I wanted to be a better coach. So it's like, I got really interested in that. I was telling a colleague about it, and she says, "Oh, you need to read this book." So there's Do Improvise by Robert Poynton. Basically is a great read, and it takes the principles of improv and boils it down to three things, 6 words: notice more, let go, and use everything. And it's an elegant concept, and it's simple. And it's like, okay, this is great. And how can I apply this? So obviously I was looking at how to apply it in coaching. And it basically comes down to, and improv has this larger umbrella of yes and, which is kind of the organizing principle. And that's really about accepting what is. It's accepting what's there, not trying to resist it, not ruminating about it, not catastrophizing about what could happen in the future. And it's also involves being the idea of noticing more, which is really about being present. So again, it comes back to that idea of being present in the moment, not caught up in thinking, not resisting things, accepting what's there, and becoming more aware of what your options are. Letting go is about letting go of control, letting go of judgment. For me, that was about trusting a larger being to be in charge and not trying to be in charge myself. And then using everything is really, to me, came down to being grateful for what there was and not trying to not being upset that it wasn't different. And it's really about the learner's or the beginner's mindset. And so those things were, again, really simple. It was something I could bring to coaching. It was something I could bring to my life. And that then led me to get interested in this idea of mindset. About that time, and I was just open to this idea of presence and mindfulness. And I read a couple other books that I'll recommend. They're great reads. This one's called Finding the Space to Lead, A Practical Guide to Mindful Leadership by Janice Martirano. And Janice Martirano was a legal counsel at General Mills who was at a crisis burnout point in her life and found mindfulness as a stress reduction technique, and then brought that into General Mills, and then is basically bringing it into other organizations. And then some other colleagues recommended this book, Search Inside Yourself, by a Google engineer, Chade Meng Tan, I think is how his name is pronounced. This is very interesting. And then he ties the idea of mindfulness with emotional intelligence. And he talks about the fact that if we're mindful, we become more aware of our somatic senses and our emotions. And if we pay attention to that, that can actually help us make better choices. And we can actually keep from getting caught up in the amygdala hijack and make better choices to keep from going down that path. So those were all great reads. I ran into another reference, mindful.org. I recommend go to their website, sign up for their newsletter if you're not already familiar with that. And then there's a bunch of apps. I've used Calm, I've used Aura, and I've used another one called Simply Being that can all help you with the idea of meditation and developing a practice of meditation. But I'm not a disciplined meditator. I've adopted more of an in the moment practice where if something is stressing me, I just lean into breathing. And that's a great way to get out of your head, back into your body and into the present. Just focus on that anchor of your breath. And you can also lean into senses. You can be going for a walk. You can be listening. You can be leaning into your sight. It's amazing what you'll notice when you don't go for a walk with your dog or whatever, and have your senses open to what's going on around you. So those are a lot of different resources that I started to play around with. And again, I don't think you need a mat. I don't think you need a pillow to sit on. I think that's great if you do. But there's just a lot of ways in the moment where I've found myself feeling a little bit agitated and just going into breathing modes. It could be an irritating person. And I have an example, which I don't want to share here because this has been recorded. Or it could be waking up in the middle of the night when your mind is running and you're thinking about the next day or whatever. And just trying some deep breathing exercises there to focus on the present. So anything that can help you develop that practice, I think is useful. So this was all great. My one word for the year, I pick one word to frame each year. And in 2016, it was the word presence, and I was doing all that stuff. I thought, okay, this is great. And then last year, things didn't work out so well. I experienced an epic failure for a number of reasons. We had our house on the market. It sold twice, and then the deal fell through, and it finally sold a third time. The first two times we thought we were going to a condo, we were downsizing, and it was perfect. We thought it was great. After the second time when the deal fell through, the appraisal was ridiculously low, and I had a total tailspin. So you name it, ruminating, being angry, choosing to be angry versus being present, all those things, I did them, and I did them well. And so I realized that wasn't working, and I actually worked with my coach to kind of work through that and get to the point where I realized that I was making choice. Was trying to control things I couldn't. I was basically doing all the things that the improv principles suggested you don't do. I was not using what was there. I was resisting that, and I was not being my true self. My true self is really to be a lighthearted, peaceful presence. And so this year I chose the word peace to remember that and to kind of get back on track and try to continue to develop those practices. So I want to show this graphic, and just bear with me here because I got to do a little jockeying around.
So while you're sharing that, Jeff, I have a question that
Yeah.
And I don't want to get you a little bit off track or anything, but what do you think is the one benefit you have seen so far by working so hard at trying to become more mindful? Because you've obviously read a lot of books and you've worked very hard at it. What is it that has stuck with you to help you keep at it?
Well, there's 4 that I wrote down. So thanks for the prompt. That's actually good timing. One is it's simple. It's easy to remember, and it's basically you access it through the breathing. The first step of the improv principles is to be present, and then to let go and do all those other things. It leads to more peacefulness in the moment, because you're not worried about what you can't do about in the past, or what you worry about in the future. For me, it's the place where I connect with the presence of God. It's not when I'm in my head; it's when I'm in the moment. And then maybe one of the more important ones, which is supported. All these things are supported through research, as far as the health benefits. But one that's especially interesting is it allows you to access your intuition and your heart knowledge. The brain is not the only source of knowing that we have. Our heart and our gut, our whole nervous system is really part of our knowing. And if we can get out of our head and actually into the rest of our body, we can access some of that wisdom that's there. So thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
Here's the graphic that I alluded to in comments, but just was going to kind of open this up to the group. When you see this graphic, is it showing up on your screen?
It is.
What comes up for you when you see anyone jump in? What comes up for you when you see that graphic?
This is a time to unmute, folks. Go right ahead and unmute if you have a comment. Jump in. I personally like the graphic on the mindful myself. It seems much more soothing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of the perspective of I'm more on the mindful half. I'd like to get over to the less busy half of the graphic, but I think I'm kind of stuck somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, right. And it's contextual. Sometimes we're able to bounce. And I think with mindfulness, that's the trick, is to be able to be more able to shift, because the full mind cloud on the left is going to be part of life. We can't really avoid that, but to what degree can we shift and experience more of the one on the right? Who else?
This looks like a picture of why pets are great for emotional and mental health.
Absolutely, yes.
Because the mind of the dog is simple and pure, and all he really wants to do is go for a walk.
Yeah.
Cheers on that.
Yeah. And I think in our business, in our profession, that's one of the the advantages is we work with creatures that are able to be in the present moment to a much greater capacity than we are. Yeah.
What stood out to me as well is that in the image of the mindful graphic, I mean, it's all negative things. It's people focusing on things that make them upset or like, things breaking down versus the mindful where it's something happy and they're looking at their actual environment.
Yeah, they're noticing what's there, which is, hey, the sun's out, there's some trees. I'm actually experiencing life, which is, that's where life happens, is right now in the here and now. Yeah.
It's also a great reminder to stay in the moment because our pets are so great at that, right? They have no concept of time. I walk out the door to put something in my car, I come back and they act like they haven't seen me in a week.
Yeah. So the good news is we can learn a lot from our pets.
No doubt about it.
Well, I don't know. My two cats have a concept of time from the perspective of their bowl is full or their bowl is empty. So if I come back and their bowl is still full, they ignore me. But if it's empty, then they're like yelling at me. So
I think cats are a whole different ball game.
They kind of are.
Yeah, that's right. We may have to leave cats out of this, but
I would have to say that I think that my dog always notices when I specifically pick this up, and how that must mean I could easily drop that and have a free hand to scratch. So whenever I have this in my hand, she pops into my lap.
yeah.
Singularity of focus.
So here's the definition. John Kabat-Zinn is well known for, I think, being the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction. He says mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, which is intentional. It's on purpose. It's in the present moment. So we're focused on what's happening right now, getting out of our heads. And then a key part is this idea of being non-judgmental about ourselves, being able to be compassionate towards ourselves, non-judgmental about the thoughts, but just noticing them without adding any kind of evaluation or judgment with it that come up, and noticing what happens in our environment without passing judgment, which we so naturally do. And then I like Frankl's take here: between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response, and our response lies our growth and our happiness. So the idea that there's a space there, often which we blow right past because of habituated patterns of behavior and the fact that the busy world distracts us. But mindfulness is kind of the tool that allows us to see that space and then perhaps make different choices in what we do. So I'm going to pull you back over here. I think I unscreen shared successfully. Is that correct?
You did.
All
You
right.
did. So I want to be fair to those of you who have committed, 25 minutes of your time as promised. Jeff is willing to stay a little bit longer and continue this discussion. There's a lot, obviously, that we could talk about. So we'd love to invite those of you who would like to stay for a few more minutes to let us continue the discussion for about another 10 minutes or so. But for those of you who must go, you certainly may do so. Don't feel badly about, having to back off and shut out. But we do hope you'll join us again. And we're really glad that you did come spend some time with us today. So, Jeff, if you want to carry on just a tad bit, I know you've got interesting last minute thoughts that you might want to share. And
Well, I'd love to hear from anyone that was willing to stay on, just what's attractive to you about mindfulness, and maybe what you've experienced and learned that you would share with me and anyone else that stays on, just so we can continue that conversation.
I think one thing I've learned, going back to the pets and their sense of time and everything, my cats have learned in the morning that I won't get up and feed them until I have my overhead lights set on a timer. They turn on at a specific time in the morning. And to me, that kind of taught me something along the lines of, I need to pick something in my environment that when it happens, that's when I take a few minutes to just sit and think. So whether it's setting an alarm on my phone or when I see something in my on my TV or anything like that. It seems to be a good reminder for me.
And that's one of the techniques that I've run across frequently is, have a little reminder on your Apple Watch or on your phone that beeps, and it's like, okay. It gives you that.
I like that breathing. You breathe in and you breathe out, and it really does clear your head. I mean, I don't know if you got anybody who has an Apple Watch. I would encourage you to try it because it's amazing when you're feeling totally stressed and frantic. It reminds you to breathe, and you do feel refreshed and like kind of ready to jump back in and tackle again.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's kind of irritating every once in a while.
I had no idea what that was, and that kept like beeping on me. And then my brother told me and was like, you need to try this. And unfortunately, I became impatient and was like, is this over yet? But I'm learning.
So Catherine, you're hyper.
And I haven't had any caffeine today, so I'd like to, tell all y'all that this is sheer normal right now. So y'all should be afraid.
Very afraid.
Jeff, I'm curious what tips you have for overcoming the addiction to the stuff. There are a few people on this call that might classify themselves as workaholics. We do get sucked into the beeps on the phone. Yeah, thank you for waving, everybody. I wasn't going to single anyone out. But there is so much that rewards us for not being mindful. How do you get past that and create a reward for yourself in the mindfulness? Riff on that for a minute, if you would.
Oh, man. I think, my first thought is it probably varies for everyone as far as what works best. For me, I don't watch the news. I just refuse. I'm forced to see the soundless version at the gym when I go, but a lot of times I'm not in that section, so I don't have to see the headlines. I try to stay away from some of that noise that's out there. And
Jeff, I am so with you on not watching the news. It's reduced my stress levels so much.
Yeah,
right.
It's just, and that's because what is that? It just takes you into worried about, upset about what happened in the past or worried about the future. It's one of those two places. Rarely, except for the little token thing at the end of some newscast where it's a feel-good deal, do you actually appreciate, do you experience gratitude or love or peace or any of those things? So,
well, and a lot of times it's stuff that we can't control. Or if we can control, there's one thing we can do, but you don't need to see 7 hours of news to tell you about the one little action you can take.
Yeah. So that works for me. And then I have a little devotional book I read, which I realized actually, I've been reading it. It's just a daily deal. I've been reading it, for probably the last 3 or 4 years. And I realized over time that the common theme is about being present and experiencing presence and peace. And so that reminds me to start every day. I also do a gratitude practice along with that, where I'll identify 3 things I'm grateful for. Really, it's trying to focus my brain on something different and those are 3 things that I do. It's not a lot of stuff. But I don't think it has to be like rocket science things. I don't know. Is that helpful, Jody?
Yeah. I appreciate all of that.
Yeah, and maybe some others may have some ideas too that work for them.
I was just going to ask that question too, Jeff, because that all makes such sense, right? So who besides me here knows that all makes sense, but we still have a hard time making it happen? So you talking about having to try it over and over again really resonated with me, because I had this feeling that I was failing miserably in my mindfulness because I couldn't quite get it down. It just wasn't working.
Everything you read on mindfulness, it's like they bend over backwards to say, don't beat it yourself up, because it's a practice. You're going to screw up, and that's the whole point, is that you practice breathing, your brain wanders, and you just go back to breathing, because it's really, you're just training your brain to be able to make that shift more easily and more consistently when the stakes are higher.
So I have an interesting, I'm a little naive in all this, because I always think I need more time to think, right? So I'll go running because running gives me time to think. But what I find really interesting about taking that 40 seconds, that breather moment, is it's meant to clear the brain. And so for someone who is, i.e. Jody, a workaholic over here, I mean, as you were going through, I hate to say this to you, but as you were going through, you gave me like 6 ideas for more bridge clubs. And so I'm writing them down. So we're supposed to be talking mindful, and then I'm screwing it up.
Jody, come on. You're getting outed here.
So I am curious about how do you balance between those two pieces? Because I do need more time to think, because thinking is what I do. But then I love the feeling. I'm not going to lie. It is a little euphoric of nothing. Mm-hmm. But how do I make that more attractive to myself? I guess is going to be the question.
It's a personality thing, Catherine.
Yeah, it could be a person. So, I mean, my question to you is, what works for it? It's a Dr. Phil question. How's that working for you? I mean, if it's working and you and you're creative and you're able to, not be stuck in ruminating. If the thinking is useful, then that's one thing.
But I'm missing this other piece. It's euphoric to me to sit there and have this moment of pure nothing. And so I have to find a way to make that as attractive as a glass of wine at 6 o'clock at night, or something, because it is really euphoric to have your brain go.
Well, here's something you can try. There's a approach called savoring, and I'm the worst at this. So like food, I stand in the kitchen and I wolf it down. I don't savor anything. It's just, it's like it fuels my body so I can move on to the next thing. But so take that glass of wine and sit and just savor it. Don't think about anything. Just lean into your senses. The feel of the wine on your tongue, the taste on your taste buds, the smell of the nose on the wine, and then sit in a place where you've got some beauty to take in, and don't think at all. Just savor the moment. With that,
I like that. I can do that.
I think we should plan a spa day and just pop each other if we start to talk.
I may be in Vegas, baby. We'll be doing that.
Yeah.
Won't work for everybody. But
the martini meetup is now going to have this section where they're just silence and people are just.
Everyone's going to be sniffing. Yeah, it'll be awesome.
So to that point, though, I'd like to ask everybody who's still on the call a favor, though. So try that. Try the savoring. Try a moment, and just shoot Catherine and me an email and let us know how it worked. Let us know, were you successful? I mean, what was it that kind of made you start to feel a little bit of that piece?
There's three things that I've experienced. 3 different disciplines. One is from yoga practice or massage practice. It's called grounding, and it is putting your feet literally into grass or into dirt, and literally grounding yourself as if you're a lightning rod to the ground. And if we go for more than a week or 10 days, most of us lose contact with the earth.
Yes. Yeah.
So grounding is one of those things that you can do right outside your back door, most of us anyway, or across the street if you live in a city, and go to a park and you ground. And in doing that, then you have the chance, Catherine, not to drink the 4th glass of wine, seeing if it tastes different than the 3rd, but to actually study bark on a tree, to look at the contrast of shadows, to look at the world as an art piece. So the grounding piece of that goes with the focus discipline. The second paradigm shift for me was going through PAR training with Pat Malone. And one of the things that comes out of that is intentional listening and getting out of your own way. And I've been able most of the time, especially when I'm alone, to get out of my own way. I still fight with it in one-on-one conversations because I tend to want to direct the conversation. Jody knows that. But it's important to remember that you need to stay out of your own way. The noise in your head, it's not going to help you. You've got to just look beyond it. And the third area and set of tools that I picked up was through, I think it's James Allen. David Allen is his first name. GTD, Getting Things Done. And he takes us backwards in time management to what I call the old used car salesman's card catalog. 3x5 cards, all staged. And he basically says, if you can't handle something in 2 minutes or less, then it needs to be an item that you deal with intentionally. Over 80% of them are going to get thrown away. But you make a decision at the end of 2, maybe 3 minutes. I can't finish this now. I'm going to finish it on Thursday afternoon, and you put it in the Thursday file. And those 3 areas have been very effective for me. The hardest one for me to do is grounding.
Yeah.
Because it tends to keep me there. Grounding also deals with our vitamin D uptake. And we really should be getting 15 to 20 minutes a day of direct sunlight on our faces or sunlight on our faces. So those 3 things I'd add to the conversation.
Oh,
the other one, there's an app, you mentioned meditation apps, called Headspace.
Yeah.
It is a really good one. It does cost a little a month, but it's a very good discipline. And the picture is sitting in the middle of an intersection and letting the traffic go around you, not be you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are great.
Yeah, those are really good suggestions.
Yes, driving in traffic does present many options to be mindful, at least in Jeff's world. And I fail there often as well.
Well, but we can't control anybody but ourselves.
Exactly. Anyone else want to add anything?
I just thought I'd throw out a lot of the things we talked about. Thinking of sport, there's a lot of print that's been devoted to sports psychology. And a lot of the thinking in sports psychology is living within the moment and visualizing what, and really, regardless if we're sports or not, visualizing what success looks like. But by focusing on that, you take a lot of the peripheral things, the mind clutter out of the picture, so you're focusing there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has always worked for me, sports psychology, is the breathing you guys were talking about earlier. And when I first was looking at this, the way it was explained is inhale slowly for 10 seconds, and then hold your breath for 10 seconds, and then slowly exhale. Well, I've never been a smoker, but when I started doing that, I said, this looks like a lot like people that are smoking cigarettes and how they have that peaceful feeling. And so anyway, I still am not a smoker, but I could see where even if you were a smoker, you could see how just breathing like that, part of it is making sure that you keep full breath for 10 seconds. It does help to lower your blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think just tie it all together. And unfortunately, it's all nice. We're sitting here and we're talking about tools that we can use, strategies to use, and then things happen in the real world. And it all goes out the window, because no matter how hard you work on things, sometimes you react. And I guess those are the things we all want to work on, is how can I react more proactively? How can I not be dissatisfied for how I responded to something?
And I agree with that, Brian, totally. We're always going to fail at some point. I think, though, I can say that my track record, my batting average, if we want to go back to your sports analogies, is improving over time just by practicing, and things that I might, except for last summer, of course, that's off the table. But I'm noticing that I seem to be better at navigating some of those things that in the past would have been problematic by trying to pay more attention to this. And I don't always have success, but I think I'm increasingly having success. I appreciate that, the breathe in for 10 seconds. I've heard breathe in for 6 and hold it for 6 and out for 6. But I think that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system and, creates those calming effects. And then you also reminded me of a video by Judson Brewer. It's called "You're Already Out, Get Out of Your Own Way. You're Already Awesome. Get Out of Your Own Way," or something like that, where he talks about flow, and he talks about Lolo Jones in the Olympics, where she was, 3/4 of the way through the low hurdles and ended up hitting the last two and going from first place to seventh. And she talked about the fact that basically she got out of flow and got into her head and started to overthink, and that was the moment when she hit the hurdle. So that idea of kind of being in flow state is something that he talks about nicely there, and he ties it in with meditation and training your brain to be more in that state.
I think I'm envisioning the next session, how we get into our state of flow.
Yeah.
For each of us here.
Yeah.
So we're at 7:45. Well, okay, 7:45 East Coast time, 6:45.
It's time for Catherine to pour another glass of wine off camera, I think.
Already did that.
All right, I missed it.
So Jeff, any final words for the crowd? Really great discussion, everyone. Thank you for your participation. Any final thoughts on mindfulness or the world in general you'd like to share before we say goodbye?
I'll share one more quote that a friend of mine shared. I was telling I was doing this. She shared with me. It's only possible to live happily ever after on a moment-to-moment basis. Margaret Bonanno. So I encourage everyone to play around with this idea of mindfulness and being present and see where it takes you.
And don't forget, send Catherine and I an email letting us know how you've done with your little timeout practice. If you had any success.
And I'm inspired by Kirk. I am going to schedule, and everyone that's come to this Bridge Club, a moment for grounding at WVC, because we could walk out at the veranda and we could just stick our little feet in the grass, do a little kumbaya moment, but we could do it.
I like it.
Up to the sunshine and our feet in the grass.
Yes, and people would go, "What is happening?"
I would love to
And
see
they would be intrigued and they would join us.
They would, and we'd say we're having a grounding moment. You think I'm joking?
I'm with you.
I'll do
Yeah.
it.
I'm with you. We just cannot have any ketamine around, or people will know exactly what's going on.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.
Everyone, slow.